roll tape? Yep. Okay. Should I guess I'll just do it from start to end here. All right. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Good morning. You guys must have lost a bet. Like here we are, the last working day before the holidays, right? Anybody working next week? Okay, all right. Well, we're going out with a bang. This is my last presentation on my last work day this year. So I'm Mitch Woodward, and I work for North Carolina Cooperative Extension. We're part of NC State in North Carolina. Wendy used to work with us. We ran her off. So she went up. You went up the ladder a few rungs, right? So she's here. Anybody, you all work with Wendy closely? Well, I'm sorry. All right. She's great. We miss her. We miss you very much. So it's not as fun. It's not as much fun anymore. So it's too bad. So I've been around a while, and we do watershed training at NC State. And when Wendy sent me this slide set, I said, come on, we're going to do this training. And I thought, this sounds familiar. We came up with this training about 15 years ago. Went to the state. I looked it over and I thought, these are our slides. They didn't give us credit. It went to the state. I think they must have paid for it and it put it all together. So we're going to run through this. This is not the most exciting training in the world. I'll be frank. It's pretty dry. I'll try to make it as entertaining as possible. How many of you apply fertilizer? You apply fertilizer to any parks, any public lands, that type of thing? Do any of the departments do that? Parks does? Parks does. Streets does occasionally, like right-of-ways and all that. Okay. So part of Kernersville is in the Jordan Lake watershed. A small part, because you guys are in like 3 watersheds. You got Yadkin PD, which is probably most of the town, right? And then what else? Roanoke. The Roanoke. Okay. All right. All right. So you're in the Cape Fear. Jordan Lake is Upper Cape Fear. So I live down to Lillington now. Moved out of Apex down to Lillington now, and the Cape Fear goes right past us. So it's the biggest watershed. So we're going to go through today. It's kind of like Fertilizer 101, and this is state mandated training because the way the state rules have it, you either have to develop a management plan on every acre that involves nitrogen, phosphorus, and other or additives to soil, or come to this training. And so, have any of you done soil testing? Any of you do soil tests? Okay, all right. Well, this is going to be Science 101 then. We'll take it back. So we'll try to keep this simple and move along through this pretty quick. How much time do I have, Wendy? About an hour? All right, all right. So water quality is real important in the state of North Carolina. How much money do you think the state makes in tax revenue on water-related tourism? People coming to go skiing? I'm sorry? A lot. Yeah, that's a good answer. Skiing, going to the beach, going hiking out through the forest, right? Canoeing, all that stuff. It's about $3 billion. So do you think the state is going to be excited about protecting water quality? If you got $3 billion in income, yeah, you bet. Drinking water is a big deal because the water that runs off of your watershed here, part of your town, it goes through the Jordan Lake. And what cities have that as their water supply? Their drinking water. Cary, not Raleigh so much, part of Wake County, Apex, Cary. Cary's big. Cary's like the 4th or 5th biggest city in North Carolina now. It's pretty big. It's about 130,000. North Carolina is in the top 4 in terms of people moving into the state. I mean, no surprise, right, if you're out. We get somewhere around 300 people a day moving here. You hear about people moving out of California, people moving out of New York, hundreds of thousands. moving out. I saw this earlier this week. Hundreds of thousands have moved out of those states to go into Texas, Arizona, Florida. You never hear about it much, but we're number 4 or 5. A lot of people coming here in the Raleigh area, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, it's about 70. Here, I'm not sure about the Central Piedmont or Western Piedmont. I'm not sure about how many people, but you can imagine. So if we've got 300 people moving here, so it's a lot. Yeah, people moving out of high tax states, people moving down. We got great weather, great roads. People love North Carolina, so that's why this is a growing economy here. So when you think about water, of course, these types of things happen. Do you want to swim in that? Do you want to fish in that? A lot of people, when they think about water quality, think trash. It's the things you don't see as much. What's the number one pollutant of North Carolina waters? Sediment. It's dirt suspended in water. It's the number one pollutant. We have a lot of laws about controlling sediment off construction sites and farms and whatnot. So a lot of laws about that. Nutrients, though, are something relatively new. Nitrogen, you look on a fertilizer bag. What do those 3 numbers mean? Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, right? You talk about limestone, too, because the pH of our soils is so low. So they add lime to get the pH up into a good area. So nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash is what this is all about. So again, I talked about water-related tourism. This is a great place to go. Lots of tubing and everything else. A lot of these neighborhoods being built out west and around here, named after water, Mountain River, and some of these others. So these are the major North Carolina watersheds. So where is Kernersville? Right there. You guys are at the top of the hill, right? So you got the Roanoke, you got the Jordan Lake, which becomes part of the Cape Fear, you got the Yadkin down here too. So you guys are right there. It's a little more complex here because you got 3 watersheds. So Jordan Lake was a lake reservoir that was built, I think, back in the 80s. Won't go through all of this. Just realize about 250 billion gallons of water on a typical day. And it is managed by the Army Corps of Engineers. So it's a big deal because it's a drinking water supply for Apex and Cary. And as I mentioned, that is an area where it's growing by leaps and bounds and the 4th or 5th biggest city in the state. So there's a close-up of the Jordan Lake watershed here. And again, let's see if all right, that kind of works. There's Kernersville right there. So you got a little chunk of it right there. Most of you are in the Yadkin, but you're right there. So run through this a little bit. So ground cover, red is impervious area largely, so that's developed. So that produces a lot of stormwater, of course. The greens and the yellows, we have either forest or cultivated ground and farming. So that's good because the water soaks in, the stormwater. How much stormwater, well, let's back up. How much precipitation do we get annually? How many inches of rain do we get? It's right around 50. Varies, of course. 48, 52, something like that. So if you get an inch of rain on a square foot of pavement, of anything impervious, parking lot, roads, rooftops, how many gallons of water is that if it rains an inch on a square foot? Guess? It's 6/10 of a gallon in an inch. So imagine if it rains 50 inches on that same square foot, that's 30 gallons. So for every square foot of this parking lot, of this roof, of this building, if it rains 50 inches in a year, that's 30 gallons that runs off. So when you walk out of here today and you're looking around, so once we used to say, Wendy and I used to say about stormwater, once you see it, you can't unsee it. When you see rooftops, and every rooftop you see, think of it as if it rains 50 inches there for a year, that's 30 gallons for every foot. But we're talking about a massive amount of water that is running downhill in Jordan Lake. And that's why the state is so interested in protecting it. So makes sense, 1983, we won't go into that, but there's the dam if you're interested. There it is. So a lot of other activities. There's camping there, there's fishing, there's boating, all kinds of stuff in Jordan Lake. So I'll kind of run through that. Swimming, have not been down there swimming. And the drinking water, this is the Town of Cary website. You can go in there and you can look up the quality of the drinking water report. It's a public report, and they draw water from Jordan and they pump it along 64, and that's their drinking water supply. There have been water quality problems since they impounded that reservoir. It's eutrophic, so what that means is there's an overabundance of nutrients that grow algae. And when that algae dies, it can take oxygen out of the water and kill the fish. So that's why they relate poor water quality. So since they built, we've got nutrient issues. So where are the nutrients coming from? Fertilizer, which is why we're here today. We can do something about that, and that's coming from urban lands, right, developed lands, farming, also atmospheric deposition. Where's that coming from mainly? Car exhaust, right, coal-fired power plants, nitrogen compounds raining down when it rains. So we've got that. So I guess we're working on that. It's more of a long-term solution. But we need to kind of focus on what we can control, and putting the right amount of nutrients on a patch of ground where you're trying to grow turf or trying to grow a crop, reducing erosion and following soil recommendations, soil nutrient recommendations, is how we do nutrient planning. So that's what we're focusing on today. So I've kind of talked about this. So if you look at the local news, of course this goes back a few years. Chatham County is growing like leaps and bounds. The population of that county is going to double here in the next few years. It's been in the papers over the years, so this is nothing new. Development is really, and reduced amount of areas where stormwater and can infiltrate is an issue that's really causing stormwater to rise. And so that's a big deal. And it's going to continue with 300 people moving here a day. So through this, there have been rules that have come through since the early 2000s. And there are basically 5 sets of rules that impact Jordan Lake and impact Kernersville. So we've got old and new development rules, what you have to do for new development to be consistent with stormwater rules, what old or previous construction needs to do, wastewater treatment plants. And what's interesting about that is the state actually put regulations on wastewater treatment plants to reduce the amount of nutrients in the lake, and it didn't work. It wasn't enough. So that's why we have the rules that we have today, where we have to look at fertilizer. So it just wasn't enough. They reduced the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus in that. So then they switched over to nutrient management. And that's what we're going to talk about mainly today. Agriculture has to do nutrient management as well. They either have to go to a training or have to, like this one, or have to develop a nutrient management plan. A lot of them do that. And buffer protection. Buffers are one of the best practices, and this is basically vegetation down by streams. It's a fantastic practice, reduces erosion, holds the stream banks, because you know where a lot of the sediment comes from? Eroding stream banks. So if you have a lot of wood down there, you've got a lot of roots down there, you're going to reduce the amount of sediment, the state's #1 pollutant, and it helps to treat the nitrogen and the phosphorus. It's kind of rolling downhill too. So it gets a little bit in the weeds here, but basically they divided this upper watershed into 3 low. You guys are in the hall. And I think you're in the hall. Yeah, you're in the hall. The Hall subbasin has a goal of 8% nitrogen reduction and 5% phosphorus. And this is based on research that they looked at. Now, if you take a look at, for example, in the Durham area, look what they've got to do. 35% nitrogen reduction and 5% phosphorus. How are they going to do that in Durham? It's a big question because it's going to be expensive because they got to put in more and more stormwater practices. And the new stormwater practices, you know, wet ponds, wetlands, right, bioretention, those will hit those numbers, but they have a lot of old systems out there too. So just realize that each segment of this upper river basin needs to do a certain amount. And so you're part of that. So Wendy, this is your slide. So this is the segment of Kernersville, the western, we call it like a western edge, or does this area have a name? Just the, okay, I meant eastern. Yeah. The eastern part of Kernersville, this is the part that's in the Jordan.
East, sorry. So it's east of 66, and I think it's a little bit north of,
Southeast of Main Street.
South Street. Yeah. So it's a nice little area. Showed on there.
That runs up to the northeast.
Yeah.
This is Maine, so
right.
South.
So you have Bodenhammer and Mountain Street.
Bodenhammer, Mountain.
Old Greensboro Road, and then North Main.
North Main. Yeah. Okay.
And County Line Road.
All right.
That's basically our borders.
All right. So this is the Jordan. Now these rules make sense across every chunk of the city, of the town. But this is what is actually in the watershed. So we thought we'd point that out. Thank you, Wendy. So we're going to look at nutrient management. We're not going to look at these others. We're going to look at the nutrient management part of this. And this is real informal. If you have any questions, let me know. So who needs to participate? Well, applicators to any of the following lands. So if you're commercial cropland, okay, farming, pastures, regardless of acreage, commercial, ornamental floriculture, greenhouse operations, golf courses, public recreational lands. So that's kind of where you come in, right? There, Parks and Rec is out there applying fertilizers to right-of-ways, right? Streets, roads, utilities, recreational lands, parks, institutional lands, okay, the total at least 5 acres. So you got to have this training. Or plan. All right, and any hired applicators that are doing that kind of work for you. Do you do all the work yourself, or do you contract it out? A little bit of each, like Wake County does with schools. They contract it out. Okay, well, they got to be trained as well. So you either attend a nutrient training or used a certified nutrient management plan written by a nutrient management planner. So I'm one. I passed Deanna's test. So I don't know if there's any more. Are you one? No? Well, maybe it's better not to be, because you can go to the training, which is what we're doing here. Okay, what about homeowners? Homeowners apply a lot of fertilizer, right? We try to educate them. We try to educate the commercial landscapers as well that put a lot of fertilizer out. They are exempt because there's no way for cities and towns and the state to really regulate them. There's a lot going on there. So we try to educate them. We have our master gardeners. We have others that we've trained. But with the exception of homeowners, everyone who hires an applicator must ensure that the applicator has attended and completed a nutrient management class. So all of your names, I guess, are going to be put on a list, and you're going to get the gold star, right? Wendy's going to take care of that. So that's what this is about. So agriculture, just for your information, if any of you or your families are involved in agriculture, this is what the state defines as a farm. You can take a look down there. If you're less than that, you don't have to do it. It's a good idea to do it anyway, but again, they don't want to have the guy with like one pig in the backyard, and they're not going to call that a farm, right? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So there you go. So what has to happen? Nitrogen and phosphorus reduction goals have been established and must be met at the sub-watershed level, those 3 watersheds I showed you, and county soil and water offices will calculate those reductions. And I guess they do that every year to see if these goals are met. And these get evaluated from time to time. So that's going to happen. Again, just for your information, buffer protection, there's a 50-foot vegetative buffer required, and it's divided into 2 zones, a 30-foot and a 20-foot outer zone. So 30 inner, 20 outer. Existing uses next to a stream that are present and ongoing are grandfathered in. So somebody's got a used car lot or anything else that was down there when the rules were put in place back in the early 2000s. They don't have to move or change anything, but new types of practices that go in, or any type of practice that's going to take out some of this vegetation or trees or anything closer than that, it's got to be permitted. And they're very reluctant to give permits because these buffers, these vegetative buffers, take out a lot of pollutants and stabilize a lot of those stream banks. So they're good practices. They're good practices. So where does that apply? Lakes, reservoirs, ponds, and basically all streams that are not water conveyances. In other words, wet weather streams. All right, and you can contact DWQ or Wendy, Army Corps, and figure out if that stream needs to be protected, or is it protected or is it not. So let's talk about the nuts and bolts of this, how pollutants move. So we want to keep the fertilizer, there's 2 steps to nutrient management. It's this simple. Take a soil test, figure out what needs to go on that piece of ground, match it to what you're trying to grow. Turf, corn, soybeans, in case of farming. With you guys, it's going to be ornamentals or it's going to be turf. Take a soil test, find out what's there. You know what the crop needs are. Then match the fertilizer additions to what you need. That's all this is. A lot of people don't do it. But how much does it cost to do a soil test in North Carolina? It's free during certain times of the year. Yeah, see? It's free during certain times of the year. As we get into the spring, when people really start to go, and I get maybe around this time of year, it costs like $4. But if you do it during the summer, during the fall, it's free. All right, so we're going to go through this. North Carolina's rainy. I talked about that. A year. Right, sediment is the #1 pollutant. Oh, is there going to be a test after this?
Not for these people.
Okay. Oh, but there is going to be a test at some point. Oh, well, Merry Christmas. You don't have to take a test. All right, good. The new major problems, I talked about that. So here is a cross-section of just a piece of soil, just to give you an idea of what happens. So you got rainfall coming in from the top. And you get some of that water that infiltrates. Unless it's a parking lot or a rooftop, then it just runs off and goes right into the creek. Right? So any kind of fertilizer that's on pavement, any type of dog waste, pet waste, trash, garbage, nutrients, atmosphere, and fall roads, rooftops, any type of impervious areas, it's going to go right to the creek. On soils, you've got infiltration. Percolation goes deeper. Phosphorus and nitrogen run off into the local streams. Phosphorus is bound by soil. So the thought always has been in the past that if you control sediment, you control phosphorus. Not always true. There's a little bit of phosphorus that's soluble and it'll run off. Nitrogen, though, percolates down through the ground and moves with the groundwater towards the stream. So once the nitrogen is out of the bag, there's very little you can do to control it. And we want to put it on an actively growing crop, and we want to reduce runoff. Question?
What does P mean?
P is phosphorus. N is nitrogen. Thank you. I've done this talk a few times. Sometimes I forget. I appreciate that. P is phosphorus. K, if you see that on a fertilizer bag, K, what's K? Potassium. You won't hear a lot about potassium. Mostly phosphorus and nitrogen, because that's what stimulates algal growth. That's what causes that eutrophication that I talked about earlier. So just realize that you've got water moving across the soil surface. That's called stormwater, or just overland flow. And you've got water moving down through the soil that's carrying nitrogen, a little bit of phosphorus, but buffers, you can see, help, and just putting out the right amount of fertilizer on that at the time the crop needs it is going to really help. And that's the essence of nutrient management right there. Just a little bit of P, or phosphorus, can stimulate algal growth, and you can see the numbers are pretty small. If you have a stream that discharges into a lake or a reservoir, 0.05 parts per billion, that's pretty small. Or parts per million, I'm sorry. That's pretty small. And these are EPA water quality criteria for phosphorus. Okay? If it goes into a lake or reservoir, it's only half that. Because lakes or reservoirs are where you have these algae blooms, because it's just sitting in there, right? Streams that don't discharge or go out, like the Cape Fear, go out into the ocean, into the Atlantic, see, it's 10 times higher than this, 20 times higher than that, because it's going out into the ocean. You don't get this issue in the ocean. All right, but look at what you've got to have to stop algal blooms. Okay, and these amounts are a lot higher on ground where we put a lot of phosphorus, a lot of nitrogen, and then it rains and it's not taken up by the plant. It goes into the water. It's a lot higher than this. So this is what the Environmental Protection Agency says we need to work as a goal. If you look at nitrogen, the last slide was about phosphorus. Looking at nitrogen now. So rainfall, and cropland, surface runoff, riparian buffers take up a lot of this. And in the upper soil surface, there's this unsaturated zone. In other words, it's not at the water table. If you're down in the groundwater flow, there's a lot of carbon off of these plant roots that actually helps to treat the nitrogen. It's called denitrification. And it goes off as N2 gas, which is 78% of what we breathe in the air every day anyway. The amount of nitrogen is 78% in the air. That's not the nitrogen we're talking about. That's unavailable to most plants except, and here, this is a 10 question. Very good. How did you know that? You do well on a trivia. Yeah. Not too many people know that. A legume. Chickpeas, alfalfa, clover can pull nitrogen from the air. That's how we make nitrogen fertilizer. We pull it from the air, but we've got to use a lot of energy like natural gas to make nitrogen fertilizers. And just realize that research shows 10 to 20 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year make it to our waterways. And nitrogen causes algae blooms. This riparian buffer is the last defense before it hits the stream, because once the nitrogen's in the stream, nothing's going to touch it, nothing's going to treat it, nothing's going to reduce it. We've got to stop it before it gets in the river. So that's what this is all about. Make sense? Nitrogen can be pretty complex, but it moves with the water. Phosphorus kind of moves with the soil. So if we can cut out sediment, which is a good idea, we've handled a lot of the phosphorus. Nitrogen, though, we have to just add what's needed and when it's needed. So how do we do that? Nitrogen management is really soil nutrient management. And by that I mean soil testing and knowing your turf, because there's all kinds of different turf, right? You've got fescue. What else? Any centipede? You got maintain any centipede here? We've got centipede down our way. You know why? It likes a pH of about 5. And it doesn't grow well with nitrogen. It doesn't need nitrogen. So it's a good warm season grass. As you get east of I-95, Bermuda and Centipede become really big. I'm close to them, like 5 miles away from 95. Here, we're probably more fescue, right? So you fertilize them differently. So that's what we're all about here. Good housekeeping is a good thing. Avoid applying fertilizer to sidewalks. You see this all the time in the spring in fescue areas. The fertilizer is flying. People want their grass and their lawns green. They want the parks to look good. Keep it off of impervious areas like roads and sidewalks and other areas that are going to go right to the stream, because once it drops into a stormwater inlet, it goes right to the creek. So blow that fertilizer off, and just remember that any type of fertilizer on these hard surfaces goes right to the streams. In grass management, see, that's a stormwater practice on the left. It's just out of the shot, but we have the stormwater running across the parking lot through those bump stops and then down that slope and into a rain garden or a bioretention. What has happened here is they scalp that grass and mow it down too tight, and it'll compromise that grass, and now you've got a sediment issue, and it clogs it up. So if we're going to fertilize this and keep it green, we want the mower to be set up high. 4 inches is not too high. We need to set that up as high as possible so we don't compromise that grass, because that grass is the only thing that's holding that soil. So that's what we need there. So it should infiltrate, not run off. Compaction will limit that. So we're really dealing with compaction a lot. There are tools to battle compaction. You'll see these core aerators being used. So this is part of management. The problem with the core aerators, though, if you've got a lot of compaction, it don't really help. They'll help in the first couple inches, but if it goes down deeper than that, you need to go with a more aggressive practice called ripping, which nobody does. So, turfgrass management, we're in a tricky zone. If we were in Florida or we were in Maine, the choice would be easy. Florida, Bermuda, Centipede, likes it hot, likes it dry, not a new. You go up into Maine, into New York, Pennsylvania, cool season grass like fescue. We have cool summers generally, and they thrive in that environment. The point is, you fertilize these differently. Here it's complicated because we have a mix of both. In Wake County, there are over 1,000 lawn care companies. And you know why? Nobody's doing it right, and people are trying to grow grass in the woods as well. You ever see grass? I ask people, you ever see grass growing in the woods? You have trees everywhere, and the people are trying to grow grass in the woods. There's not enough, like in this type of situation. It actually looks pretty good there. That lawn doesn't look bad, but it's getting more sun than most. But the classic example is too much shade, too much fertilizer, and then cutting the grass too short. And you know what does more harm than anything? How many golfers? You guys golf? You know what kills us every year? The Masters tournament in April. Everybody wants their lawn to look like the Masters in Augusta. I'm a terrible golfer. I haven't golfed in 20 years. But it's fun. But everybody wants their lawn to look like that, and it's unattainable. You don't have enough money, you don't have enough resources to do that, and it leads to runoff and pollution. So you will see that there's some rain gardens that have been put in. Wendy, did you do this one? Well, that's down, maybe that's down at the coast. So we've got a rain garden capturing water off this roof, little rain gardens here. You'll see these small-scale stormwater solutions, or small-scale practices that are put in, and these will help to treat nitrogen. But the big thing is to not put the nitrogen out there in the first place. You'll see barrels, water harvesting it's called. They can be used for pressure washing and irrigation. You'll see some of those practices. Wendy and I have worked on quite a few stream restorations and stream Repair, stream bank repair. This is Daryl Westmoreland here. You still work with Daryl? Owns and operates North State Environmental, and they build these. They repair these streams. It's a very specialized area of construction. So there we are checking out a stream that he has restored. And of course, we've got our own engineers out there, beavers. We get calls about that. You get a lot of calls, a lot of beaver calls? No? Boy, I do. So they'll clog this up and create some flooding. Good for water quality, but not so good for land management. So how to make nutrient decisions? Let's run through this. So you want to provide the proper nutrients for plant production and no more. Utilize whatever's out there in the form of nutrients. Sometimes on farms there's manure, fertilizer sources. Combine all those, see what's in the soil to begin with and what's available, and put on just what you need. That's all management is. Soil testing. I didn't see any hands go up on soil testing. I'll kind of fly through this. But just realize that it's cheap, it's available, it's easy. And all you do is randomly test soil. You can do it this time of year. You get a lot of information off of these. And it gives you, it doesn't give you the total amount of nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium in the soil, but it does give you what's available to the plant. And that's what soil testing is all about. pH is important. That is everybody goes, what is pH? That is a measure of the hydrogen ions in the soil. That's what makes it acidic. So what we want to be is we want to be in this middle range. Because if you're down, and this is where our native pH is in North Carolina soils. We're down in 4, 5. We're down in 4s, 5s. And rarely will you see up here. If it's up here, somebody made a mistake and put too much lime on. But you'll see a lot of these nutrients are available right here in this middle. You get down low and you got problems. I've got centipede grass, and that's why, because I don't have to put any lime out, because the pH of my soil is about 5. I picked this grass here so I don't have to put any lime out. So you can see the rest of these, particularly that probably should be fescue, more like 6 or 6.5. You put it up there, and this is how you determine. You take about 10 or 20 randomly selected spots in a clean bucket with a soil probe, and then you send it off to the North Carolina Department of Ag and Consumer Services. They do an extraction. And just realize that if you sample a 6-inch depth and you had an acre of turf you were going to grow, that little baseball-sized chunk of soil in that bag that you sent off to be tested, it relates to 2 million pounds of soil out in the field, 6 inches depth. You're taking just a handful of soil, and it's got to be representative of what's out there in the field. And you be careful about how you take it. And you take it randomly throughout the field. And so that 1 pound represents 2 million pounds. And you don't go too deep. Soil, especially turf, let's deal with that. Turf grass, usually about 4 inches is enough. Because you don't want to be going down because the turf grass roots aren't going to be going mainly that deep. So 4 inches is about where you're going to get. And this is kind of the pattern you want to take across, kind of a randomized pattern when you sample, not just in one spot. A technique that we use all the time is if you've got a bad spot where the turf is not growing so well, you got a good spot, take 2 samples. I mean, they're free, as many as you like, right? Then you can compare the results that you get. So this is the form you fill out. Wendy knows all about this. You could hold a training. And these are the crops. You put your code in there. You can talk about all these different crops that you can have here. I think they even have one for rain gardens, Wendy. But Bermuda, switchgrass, all types of things. The crops grown in North Carolina. So you fill that out. You send that in to the Department of Ag, and that's the address where you can send it. You can mail it, drop it off. They also have a website, so you get your results via the web now. We won't go into that. So this is what the analysis looks like. And the first time you see one of these, anybody seen one of these or interpret one of these on a regular basis? I won't go into a lot of it. It's easy to learn. But what I look at is phosphorus index and potassium index. 287 on this particular soil. So anytime the phosphorus, and this is unique to North Carolina, anytime the phosphorus index is over 100, you don't need to put any more phosphorus out. This particular soil is almost 3 times the amount of phosphorus that it needs. So any fertilizer that you put out there, it's wasted, or it's going to run off when it rains. So this is an extremely important part of nutrient management, taking a soil test, putting on what you need. Let's check out the pH. Where's the pH? 4.2. Is that low? What are we growing here? It just says front. I don't see a crop on there. Lawn. Well, it's saying 1 pound of nitrogen or equivalent per 1,000 square feet. Did we test nitrogen on this? No. We just know that nitrogen on fescue gets put out basically on 3 holidays. Valentine's Day, Labor Day, Thanksgiving Day, give or take. That's what we used to say, the old farmer's trick. But that works. That works, and that's for fescue. All right, so it has a lime recommendation. You see here, 4.2, 120 M. All right. That would be 12. That would be 1,000. So basically, 1,000 pounds per acre, which is a lot. Okay. So other recommendations: you get phosphorus, and also it's here. But mainly we're looking at phosphorus, potassium, and your nitrogen is determined from the crop. It's not actually tested. So again, I mentioned the phosphorus index here, 287. That is extremely high. Whatever fertilizer you put down should not have any phosphorus in it. Potassium, all right, the Ki, it's at 28. It could use some there. And this is the index system that I mentioned that was specific to North Carolina. So anytime you're over 100, it's very high. So this is why the soil tests are so valuable. And so it even recommends the type of fertilizer here. It's saying that, it's saying that 7 pounds of 15,014, because that's the phosphorus, the middle number, or equivalent per 1,000 square feet, will get you that recommendation. So to try to spell it out as much as possible and make it easy. All right, we won't go into that. Turf is a crop. It is a significant crop in Jordan Lake. It is expanding because people like their green grasses, particularly after the Masters tournament. It does require special management. It needs to be cut correctly, not too close. And is turfgrass native? Is fescue native to North Carolina? It's not. No. How about Bermuda? Bermuda native? It's African. So we don't really have any native turf type grasses here. We've got switchgrass or panicum, but those are bunch grasses that you'll see on the side of the road. You probably maintain some of that in your parks, or you'll see them at DOT roadsides. The big tall grasses, they're brown this time of year. Those are natives, but not our turf type grasses. So this is part of why the management is such a problem. All right, so I mentioned that. So here, this would be our fertilizer application, nitrogen application for fescue. Remember I said what 3 dates? Valentine's Day, Labor Day, Thanksgiving Day. The blue line is the amount of uptake for fescue, amount of nitrogen uptake for fescue during those times of year. Why is it low in the summer? Because it's hot and it's not growing. Cool season grasses grow when it's cooler. Early spring, March, April, May, so you put fertilizer on just before that, and also in the fall because it's sending its reserves down into its roots so it can survive the winter. All right, so that's fescue. All right, let's look at Bermuda. Just exactly the opposite, right? So there's fescue again. Bermuda grows when? Hot time of the year, right? So we're talking about mid-April, May, June, July, going into August. So 1 pound of nitrogen per every 1,000 square feet 4 times a year, because look at the red nitrogen uptake curve for that crop. It's right in the middle of the summer. So that's when you apply nitrogen. A lot of people that don't know what they have, fescue, will put nitrogen on in the summer. There's no better way to kill fescue than to put it on when it's hot and dry. Bermuda, though, you're going to really stimulate it. I'm going to go through this really quickly, this part. There are a lot of fertilizer types out there. There's a lot of different grades. Just remember they all contain nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash, or potassium. And you'll see it as P, see it as P2O5, you'll see it as K or K2O. But just realize nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash, those are double forms. And there's all kinds of different blends. And what do those numbers mean? Like if you see on a bag of fertilizer, and this is real common, you go into any big box store and it's at 10, 10, 10. What's that? What's that 10? I always enjoy going into Lowe's or Home Depot spring when people find their lawns, and everybody, you see the fertilizer just flying out the door. That first number, 10, on the bag, what's that mean? The first number is nitrogen. It's the percentage. It's the percentage. So if I have a pound of that fertilizer in my hand, and the number for the nitrogen is 10, that's a percentage. That means of that pound of fertilizer, 10% is nitrogen, 10% is potassium, and 10% is phosphorus. So when you do a fertilizer calculation and you need to put out, for example, a pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, realize that that fertilizer bag, you're going to have to put out 10 times the amount because you're at 10%. This is where we get from the weeds with the math. Just realize that that pound of fertilizer or that amount of fertilizer in that bag, it's only 10% nitrogen. So you need to put out more to hit that number of 1 pound of available nitrogen. So if I had just nitrogen and I had 10% nitrogen in that bag and I had to hit a pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, how many pounds of fertilizer would I have to put out to get 1 pound of nitrogen? 10. Because it's 1%, it's 10% nitrogen. So I have to put out 10 times that, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. I have to put out 10 times that to get 1 pound because it's only 10%. That makes sense? It makes sense because you're not going to get a bag of fertilizer that has 100% nitrogen in it. They're all going to be a percentage. If it was 50% nitrogen, how many pounds would I have to put out of the product to get 1 pound of nitrogen? I have to put out 2. Right? 2 pounds of a 50% material will give us 1 pound of nitrogen. 10 pounds of a 10% material will get us to 1 pound of nitrogen. So this is where you get into the math a little bit, but once you do it a little bit, it clears the mind. There's a lot of different forms and analysis out there. Just be aware. We're not going to go down. This gets off in the weeds. So you know what your fertilizer has in the bag. Now what you need to know is the area you're going to apply it to. because your soil test recommendation is in pounds of fertilizer per 1,000 square feet. So you got to figure out how many thousands. How many of you were good in geometry? I understood geometry. What's the area of a triangle? Half a square, right? What's the area of a circle? Pi r square, right? The area of a rectangle. Wendy's good at math. You can teach this section. No? Length times width. Yeah, I'm easy. I'm just a hired gun. You come teach this. There you go. Now, that's a good idea. You could go to County GIS. You know, I got on Google Maps. I looked at roof areas, just trying to figure out what type of impervious area there was in this watershed. It came darn close. There's about 5 houses I looked at and driveways. You know, you have that measuring tool where you click on the edges and you can carry it over here and you can draw, and it'll tell you how many square feet is in that. It's a good way to do it. You know, that's close enough. It's probably close enough. If you want to ground truth it, you know what I do? The old farmer in me just goes 3, 6, 9, 12. Wendy seen me do it, and then I pace up here and I can get an area really quick, because every one of my paces is about 3 feet. It comes really close. So if you know your recommendation from your soil test, you need to put out 1 pound of nitrogen. You have a 10-10-10 fertilizer, you know you need to put out 10 pounds of it to hit that nitrogen. And now you say, well, how much do I need to buy? Well, then my question is going to be, how many 1,000 square feet are you putting it on? Because if I need 10 pounds per 1,000 of the product, and I've got 10,000 square feet, 10 pounds, and I got 10,000, so 10 times 10 is 100, so I need a 100-pound bag. This is what 40 years in extension will do to you. You just see this in your sleep. Yeah.
Farmers, they do ammonia.
Oh, yeah. Okay, the question, what about farmers that put down anhydrous? Yeah, it's probably, so that's a pressurized gas that gets injected. Is that what you're talking about? The reason they do that is, and you see a lot of that, I don't see a lot of it here. Out in the Midwest, you see a lot of it. Because look at the percentage of nitrogen. 82%, and you can cover a really large piece of ground, because you know those fields are miles long. They drag a tank and they have a knife that injects it, and you can go for a long time with that. You don't have to fill up. So in a practical sense, anhydrous ammonia is a great thing. So yeah, you got to know what you're doing, because yeah, you get a whiff of that stuff. Yeah. So you won't find anhydrous being sold to homeowners, right? Bag fertilizer. But that's why they do it, because you can cover a lot of ground with a tank of anhydrous, because it comes in like a propane tank with wheels on it. They pull it across the field. All right, we're not going to do this. We kind of did this calculation. Once you get used to it, it's easy to do. Have any questions? Don't call me. We have extension offices here, and you can call any of them. Master Gardeners can help you, or Wendy. I'm sure she is skilled in all of these areas. Fantastic math whiz, knows fertilizers back and forward, and so just makes sense. Any questions? All right. Well, I think your names, you've got everybody's name collected. You're going to send that to the state. Everybody's going to get a certificate suitable for framing, or you're going to get it. All right. All right. Well, I'm sorry you had to suffer through this today. I'm kidding. I tried to make it as interesting as possible. I wish everybody happy holidays, and thanks for coming. All right, appreciate it.